All right. Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started right at 10 o'clock just to be punctual. We have a few people still joining us, and we'll probably continue to join us as we move along this morning. And just to let everybody know, this is going to be broadcast live onto the UF IFAS Panhandle Agricultural Connection. And then we will also record it and post those recordings online as well, so that we will be able to watch this at a later date. My name is Callan Waters. I'm with the University of Florida IFAS Extension in the Florida Panhandle. And then today we have our special guest speaker, Miss Stephanie. She is nestled away in the cozy Sheridan, Wyoming. So I'm sure she's a little bit chillier than we are here in the Florida Panhandle this morning. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Just kind of, I guess, this has been a subject that has been on my mind for a while now. And I just was going to share with everybody the reason I think it's so important. And so you can see here my very technical ranch family filing system. You can see on the right, I used to have a Dodge truck that I drove. And so I had a pretty good filing system, a large filing cabinet. And then when I downgraded to my Jeep, my filing system was cut almost to about 30%. And so then I had to get a little bit more serious about how I was filing all of my receipts. And so I think that that makes sense. And for me, it makes sense to have someone help teach this that really is comes from a farm and ranch background. I know that it's just a little bit different when you're working on an annual income and you're using your operating budget maybe to supplement your household income and some things like that. And so Stephanie comes from a ranch family, and that will just really help us make this useful. She's also a Crook County Fair hog wrestling champion. We were on a team together for multiple years. And so, she has some pretty good credentials to teach this, and I will let her introduce herself. I've known Stephanie for years, and I think she's the perfect person to help us with this morning. And so I'm going to kind of let her take it from here. We're pretty informal, so if you guys have any questions throughout this on the Zoom webinar, but also if you're watching us on Facebook, I can take those questions as well. So feel free to send those questions in the comments, and when we get to the Q&A session, we can work through everyone's questions as long as we need to. So with that, Stephanie, I'll let you introduce yourself and get us started.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Callan. It's a pleasure to be here. Excited to kind of share and hopefully have some interaction, and hopefully you find value in today. So my name's Stephanie Gilbert. I'm born and raised in Wyoming, just down the road from Callan. So we kind of grew up together. But I've always been passionate about finances, and truthfully, I'm not really sure why. But it's just kind of always been something that I've enjoyed. So when I went to college, I got an ag business degree and didn't know what I wanted to do, but knew that I wanted to do something in finance. So right out of college, I went into accounting, was an accountant for a couple of months, and realized quickly that was not for me. I enjoyed the number side, but I also enjoy the people side. And there wasn't a lot of people stuff sitting behind at a desk as an accountant. So progressing, I worked on a lot of different aspects of finance throughout my career. A large portion of it being in mortgage lending. So I am a mortgage lender. I lend in about 43 states across the US, but I also am a certified financial coach for Ramsey Solutions, and I teach a lot of financial classes and financial literacy. So as well as what Callan said, I grew up on a ranch north of Moorcroft, northeast corner of Wyoming. And so I understand not only the personal side, but also the business side, because I am an ag business major. So I don't claim to know it all. I don't claim to have all the answers. I just have some life experience that hopefully I can add value to that. So please come off mute or feel free to ask any questions along the way. But Callan asked me to kind of talk about budgeting, and, budgeting, I think, for ag families looks different than budgeting for a W-2 family, when you know what that paycheck's going to look like and it's consistent every 2 weeks or every month. So really the question comes down to, why is budgeting in general important? And it's really important because it makes sure you have enough money to cover all of your expenses, and that you're really intentional about what you do with the rest of your money. I'm also a health coach, which doesn't pertain to this, but kind of in a realm, because it's really one of those things that money, you can't win at something if you don't track it, right? Like, how many times have we gotten maybe a Christmas gift or like of money or a birthday gift, and you're like, man, I don't even really know what I bought or what I spent that on. And so if you're tracking your money, or if you're tracking what you eat, it's the same type of thing. You're not going to win at it unless you do that. So it really helps you to pay close attention to what you're spending, what you're saving, and your general your general overview of financial health. When you create a plan and set goals, it's easy for you to control those finances, excuse me, and more importantly, make informed decisions about your spending. It's also easier for you to identify any financial risks or opportunities for improvement. Things like that. So I kind of just made a top 10s list that I could think of regarding to kind of, some budgeting tips. And so again, I think the biggest thing to remember too is what works for your family may not work for your neighbor's family, or may not work for your sibling's family. I think each individual's budget is strictly unique to your family. But one of my biggest tips is for budgeting, when it comes to budgeting. So number one would be, do your budget as a family. So if you're married and you have a spouse, or if you have kids that are maybe, older kids that could kind of understand, I think it's really important to do your budget together so that you're all on the same page. I don't think you necessarily have to involve your kids in like, what do utilities cost and what of all of this, but I think it's a really great opportunity to teach finance to your family too. So I always recommend what we call a budget committee meeting, and conveniently today is the first of the month. So I always recommend doing it either at the end of the month or the first of the new month, to really sit down and make sure that everybody's on the same page, because a budget can't work if you're not working together. If I'm going to live off of a budget, but my husband's not, he's just going to spend whatever he wants, and it doesn't align with our budget. So making sure everybody's really on the same page for the budget to work. Really breaking down the budget on a monthly basis. So while most ag families do have annual income, right? Like there's a season in life or a season during the year that's when your revenue comes in. And a lot of ag families live off of operating lines of credit or money that you've been able to save up, and kind of living off that operating type of situation, not a monthly income. But what we have found to be helpful is to still kind of break it down on a monthly budget. So there's going to be monthly expenses. You're going to have utilities. You're going to have, whether it's debt payments or housing payments or insurance, things like that, because I think it's a little bit easier for me, it's easier to wrap my mind around. I know that my car insurance, for instance, is going to cost X amount per year, and maybe you only pay it once a year. That's typically what we see a lot of times in agriculture families, because your income comes in once a year. It's easier to pay all of your expenses at that time. But I'm trying to break that down on a monthly basis so that you can set some money aside and make sure that you have money for all of those expenses when that income does come in. Excuse me. When creating a budget, I always recommend starting with the most important categories first. What can't you go without? Food, shelter, supplies. If you're a cattle rancher, hay, like things like that. If you're a farmer, what types of seed do you need? All of those types of things. Fuel, if you have tractors and you need those, you have to be able to budget for those. So really focusing on, first and foremost, what can't you live without? And those kind of become the rocks in your budget. Those are kind of non-negotiables, things that you can't really give up. Maybe you can trim in some ways, like maybe you can make sure you eat at home more often and skip eating out, which is kind of funny because, most of us who live in ag backgrounds it's a ways from town. So there's not a lot of that, but there are certain ways that you can kind of scale back, but those are kind of the big things that you want to make sure that you get into your budget. I guess I should preface real quickly, if you haven't lived on a budget and you haven't, if this is your first time budgeting, you need to give yourself some grace. It's going to take you several months to even get this thing figured out, because you may not even know how much do you normally spend on groceries, especially today, because today's groceries are significantly more than they were a year ago. And so it may take some time. So just be sure to give yourself some grace as you continue to work and develop through your budgets. Excuse me. So my number 4 tip is get rid of your consumer debt as quickly as possible. So when we kind of look at it, if you have what we consider consumer debt is going to be, maybe you have a car loan that has nothing to do with the business. It's just your personal car, the business doesn't write it off, or you don't use it as a farm or ranch expense. If you have personal debt on credit cards, if you have student loans, things like that, trying to get rid of your personal debt first is that's the biggest raise you can give yourself. The quickest way you can create more cash flow and less expenses is going to be to get rid of that consumer debt. And the way I recommend doing that is what we call a debt snowball. So if you follow Dave Ramsey, I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan in most aspects, but basically breaking down your debt from smallest to largest, regardless of what your interest rate is, and really regardless of what your payment is. Because if you can focus on getting rid of some of those small things, you start gaining momentum to get rid of things like car payments or student loan debt, stuff like that, that maybe isn't substantial, but it kind of weighs on you. And it could be substantial. I mean, I've seen a lot of people with some pretty significant student loan debt. So my next tip when it comes to budgeting is redo your budget every month. You don't have to completely recreate it from scratch. You want to build off of your budget from the previous month, but it's going to be a work in progress. I remember when we first did our budget, I didn't think of things like, oh, I have to save to put new tires on my car, every couple of years, or maintenance for like an oil change, or buying oil to do, my own oil change or something like that. So it's going to take some time to get used to, but reevaluating that budget every month to not only see how did you do, where do we need to make some changes? Because maybe I thought we were going to spend $500 on groceries this month, but truthfully, our grocery bill is $800. Where do I find that other $300 to be able to shift over to that? So the other thing we kind of already touched about was tracking every dollar. Every dollar needs to be accounted for. And Callan, I love your filing system. When I worked as an accountant, we did the bookwork and taxes for a Magic store. And literally the guy would bring in paper grocery sacks, like 5 or 6 of them, just full of receipts. And as you can probably attest to, it's easier to kind of track those on a monthly basis versus when you get to the end of the year and your accountant's like, hey, I need all your stuff. And you go into panic mode because you're like, I have 3 garbage bags full of receipts, and now I have to spend days sorting through those. So, trying to find a filing system is helpful too, to track those each month. It's a little tedious, I realize that, but trust me, you will be thankful that you did it on a monthly basis as instead of an annual basis. So don't procrastinate on that. My next tip when it comes to budgeting is plan for the worst. Those of us in ag know there will always be something. There will always be a drought, a natural disaster. We don't have hurricanes in Wyoming, but obviously you guys do down there. So you can never plan too much for those. And so thinking through that, what does the history of where you're at look like? Being able to kind of sit back and say, okay, where was our worst year? Like maybe we compare everything to our worst year so far, or maybe you're new to the ag side of things and you're like, I don't know what to expect. Utilizing resources like Callan, neighbors, other people that have been in that industry for a while to kind of figure out, how often do we have hurricanes here? How often do we have droughts? It's very common in Wyoming. So being conscious of that type of thing. When it comes to balancing your budget, making sure it actually balances. So you can't operate like the government operates, where there's an endless supply of money, right? We need to try to make the budget balance. So the income that you're bringing in, every dollar of that needs to be accounted for. Obviously, in the ag sector, we don't know. We don't know what that check when we sell our calves is going to look like, right? Like we don't know what that check is going to look like necessarily to the dollar when we sell wheat or you sell hay or whatever that looks like for your particular situation. But we usually have a general idea. And so trying to budget to that idea and making sure that every dollar of that has somewhere to go. And maybe that is in savings. So that's kind of my next tip. Making sure that savings is a part of your budget is really important. I think oftentimes, and probably what I see more often than not, is we are the last to get paid. Right? Like there's no really savings accounts or saving should be one of the top priorities. And maybe it's minimal, but maybe it's setting aside for a rainy day fund, or, hey, we don't know, helping to bridge that gap between a natural disaster and what reality looks like. So, stop using personal credit. I think the biggest thing that we do, if you can, and of course, everybody's situation is different, but if you can streamline and utilize like an operating line of credit through the bank or whatever that looks like, but using one source, it's going to help you to keep track of things easier. It's going to help budgeting be easier instead of saying, excuse me, we've got this operating line through the bank, but it's not big enough, or we didn't ask for enough. And now we have to use personal credit cards for the rest of these. So really trying to stop using personal credit, stop buying anything on credit, except for your operating. And truthfully, at the end of the day, our goal should be to not need an operating line of credit, to be able to self-operate. But for a lot of us, that's just, it's kind of seems like a far off goal. But if we can focus on getting rid of a lot of consumer debt, stop using consumer debt, you're going to be one step closer to doing that. And how awesome is that going to be when you're not having to take your cash flow and your financial planning to your banker every year and say, hey, this is what we think we're going to need, and asking for money. You're not at their mercy. You're self-operating. So I think those are the 10 tips that I have written down. I wanted to make sure we left plenty of room for questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Callan and see what questions you guys have.
Okay, that's great, Stephanie. I appreciate that. If you're watching, we have quite a few people who are watching us live on Facebook. And if you are, feel free to put your comments in, or your questions in the comments, and I'll read them out as we go along. And I have a few questions that I visited with people over the past few days, and so I have those as well. So one of the things, Stephanie, I think is really, just getting started, kind of how to categorize needs versus wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a great question. The way that I typically sit back and say, can my business and our life operate without this? Right? So obviously you can't go without food. Obviously you can't go without transportation, fuel, things like that. So that's the way that I usually first address it. The second is this thing, let's just say it's a piece of equipment, for instance, that you're like, oh, this would really make my life easier if I had this new piece of equipment, or new to me piece of equipment. But looking at it from two perspectives. Number one, is it necessary for your business to be successful? Number two, is it going to create more profitability or be able to cut costs in the long run? So maybe it's time. And keep in mind, like, your time is worth something. So if you're, spending all of this time doing this one thing, and whatever this thing is that you're looking to purchase or acquire is going to help alleviate some of that. So maybe it frees up some time that you could spend doing something else that may make your business more profitable. It might be more of a need for your business. But I think we're impulse people. So we're like, oh, there's this latest and greatest thing that I think that we need. Sitting back and saying, how does this really impact my business? Does it have a positive impact or does it have a negative impact? If it has a positive impact, it might be more of a need. But is there the budget for it too? Like, can we make room? Are we going to have to sacrifice on something else that might be more important in order to attain that? So looking at it kind of from both of those perspectives.
Sure. And another thing too, for me, this has never been a strong point. Like, I have to really make myself budget. You know, I showed those pictures of my armrest because, like, that's the reality of it. That's how most people in agriculture, we are not good at record keeping and things. And I know, you know, to go to the bank, whether you go in the fall or whatever time of year it is, to ask for that operating loan, one of the things that you have to have is a household budget. So aside from all production, aside from all of your agricultural things, whether, you know, you have a cattle operation or a row crop operation or anything in between, is they're going to want to know what is your household budget that's going to go along with your production budget. And so really kind of focusing in on that. And I'm going to tell Stephanie one of the things I do, and then I want you to critique it and maybe give me some tips. And, you know, everybody has different levels of computer skills, but someone in your family might have the capability of doing this. When I got ready to start, like, I'm with everybody else, I don't even know how much I'm spending on groceries at this point. And, you know, I think a year ago we had an idea, but it seems like it's this floating target over the last couple of years that we really just are like, dang, like, I don't know. And so what I try to do is every 3 months, I download all of my expenses or all my transactions from my bank. And then I go through and I categorize them. And that really kind of helps me see where my budget was at and really gave me a place to start. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we do with our operation that I think is super helpful is we have kind of like our ranch account, and then we have our personal account. And so just having 2 checking accounts really helps us keep everything separate and allows me to, when I get ready to do taxes or whatever budgeting that might be, I download all the transactions from the ranch account and I can categorize those and kind of see where that budget is at. And then on the flip side of things, download all the transactions from the personal account and go through those. And sometimes it's a little scary to look at, like, how much do we spend at the gas station on snacks and junk that definitely, you know, you don't need, or different things, you know, really kind of break it down. How much do we spend a month on eating out? How much do I spend a month on just groceries and household, you know, things you might get at Walmart or the drugstore, things like that. And when you start to kind of break it down, for me, 1, it helped me realize where I was spending money that was probably pretty wasteful. And 2, it really just gave me an idea of what my monthly expenses were as a place to start.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm glad you brought that up, Kellen, because having separate accounts is such a huge deal. And your accountant and banker will thank you. I used to work for Farm Service Agency, so I did farm and ranch loans. And so I remember oftentimes we get people in there and they're like, I don't even know what my utilities cost. Okay, well, let's break that down. And what utilities need to be paid by the business and the farm and ranch account, and what utilities are personal. But it does help you to figure out, okay, on a monthly budget from your household perspective, if you have 2 separate accounts. And then what you can do is your operating line floods into your business account, and you can then take X amount. If your household expenses are $4,000 a month, you can then transfer a lump sum into your personal checking account. And then you can see if there's wiggle room. Like, if we've got it budgeted for the annual budget that we've turned into our banker of $4,000 a month for personal expenses and living expenses, and we can trim that down, great. What else can we do with this other $500? Can we dump it on some debt? Can we start getting ahead that way? So those are really great tips, Kellen. I love that. I'm a pencil person. I don't know why. Like, I do computers all day long, but I There's nothing that I love more than like putting it on paper. And it doesn't, I think sometimes budgeting and tracking finances scares people. It can be very overwhelming. It can be as complicated as you want it to be, but it can also be super duper simple. Oftentimes I've recommended to just to get envelopes. So put envelopes in your car, in your filing system, right? That are titled groceries, gas, whatever supplies. And instead of just throwing all the receipts in there, put them in the one that where they most likely are going to go. Now you could go to the grocery store and you could have gotten some sort of supply that you needed for, for farm and ranch expenses, or you were running, maybe you went to Big R and you got some personal thing too. You could also split those, but putting them in the category in the envelope where most likely or the bigger portion of that is going to go. That might make it a little bit easier too. It's a portable system, so you're not having to really put a lot of thought into it. We're like, hey, I just walked out of the grocery store. I'm going to put this receipt right away in the grocery thing, so I'm not have to spend hours sorting through it.
Yeah, that's, I think, planning ahead. Most of us, like you said, growing up, I remember like the boot boxes of receipts that we would load up in the truck and take to town. And,
Yeah.
I swore I was going to be so much better. And now I don't have boot boxes. I probably have like a Rubbermaid because I'm classy like that, but, it's just kind of the reality of how we function. I think it's so crazy, especially in production agriculture. We understand, like, say in the cattle industry, I understand, like, I want to break it down and track cost per cow exposed, per pound of calf weaned, and really fine tune everything I'm tracking and managing and how that's playing into my production system. But then, a huge part of our expenses on the operating side is our household budget, and really understanding, what percentage of our operating loan is going to be going to our household budget. And so that's why I think it's super important just to really kind of dial in. And as production kind of continues to get complicated by, the thinness of our profit margins, we have to take some time to maybe focus in on the things that we can do. And I think the household budget is probably one of the most neglected budgets. We do some pretty in-depth operating budgets and enterprise budgets in the agricultural sector, but our simple household budget of how much am I spending on groceries and those sorts of things are important. And like Stephanie mentioned in the beginning, sitting down and having those conversations. So in my house, I'm the one that buys all the groceries and does all those sorts of things. And so sitting down with my husband and just saying, hey, this is what groceries are costing us. This is what gas is costing us in our personal vehicles, not in the tractors and those sorts of things. But this is where we are at. I think that really helps everybody just stay on the same page. And I think at the end of the day, it's really just a discipline thing, and everybody's better at it than others. But like you said, you just have to have a place to start.
Well, and I think the household budget, like you said, is one of the most neglected. And what I've seen more times than not is, exactly to the penny, like what is it costing you per can't even think of what I'm trying to say. Anyways, yes, thank you. I'm see, it should be Monday. What your cost per acre for crops or whatever, you have that dialed down. But so oftentimes you have no idea what you spend in gas to go back and forth to town. And so usually what I see from ag families is that disconnect between the business side and the personal side. And truthfully, your biggest opportunity more times than not is to dial in your personal side, because it has a huge impact on your business side. And so if you can really marry the two and win in both, you're going to win overall. Your business is going to be more profitable. Your expenses are going to go down substantially. You're going to have more, maybe excess or extra money to do something with, to really work towards becoming self-operational, not having to worry about asking for operational money. So I'm just going to answer Linda's question. Do you mind repeating the part about money for household expenses coming out of an operational line of credit? Okay, so oftentimes ag families use an operating line of credit from their bank. So if their total annual expenses are going to be $175,000, the bank will set up a line and then you use as you need. And so typically coming close to the time, obviously that, you're selling your calves or you're harvesting or whatever that looks like for you, you're pretty close to being maxed out. So my recommendation is to only pull off the line what you need when you need it. So, and doing a set amount instead of, hey, we advance for this. Hey, we advance for this. Hey, we advance, 14 times in a month. But if you can do it once a month, we're going to say, we're going to advance $4,000 for our household expenses. And here's what our projected expenses are for the ranch. We're going to advance that amount. You could really do it either way as far as running everything through the business and then basically paying your personal account to do that. I've seen it done both ways. To me, in my mind, the way I operate is it's easier to do one advance based on what the information I've given the banker. So if my total expenses estimated for the month were 10,000, I'm going to advance off the line of credit for 10,000 into my business account. And if 4,000 of that was for personal, I'm then going to transfer from the business to my personal account. It's easier to track. Your accountant will probably thank you. And then it's easier when you're doing your, preparing your stuff for taxes and stuff to know, oh, okay, this matches up with, now I can trace where all the money went instead of which account did this advancement from the line of credit go to. Does that answer your question, Linda?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yes.
So, and if you did have a regular outside income of whatever that might be, maybe say that you bring in $3,000 a month, but then your household income is $4,000 a month. Like Stephanie said, you would just do that additional $1,000. And I think one of the keys to all of this, such a good point, is just having two separate accounts. It keeps it so much cleaner. Think of it as being a business owner. If, I owned a construction company, probably my construction company would have its own checking account and, things like that. I wouldn't be buying groceries for my family, even though I own the company out of that. It would just get so messy. And so I think this really kind of helps sort everything out. I know for me personally, just having two separate checking accounts, it just makes it so much easier to keep track of all of those expenses and know what was for the ranch or the operation, whatever that might be, and then what was for my personal household costs.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So Linda, your check is probably going into your personal account, which is perfect, using, all of that for household expenses, and then whatever is left. So maybe just make it up, let's say $1,000. You could then transfer that off or from the business account into your personal to cover the rest of your personal expenses. And what, when you're looking at your budget, what could you do to maybe get your household expenses down to where it does what your income, your W-2 income does cover. So that may not be possible, but really evaluating that household budget as well. Because that's more oftentimes than not, that is where you can cut expenses that, unnecessary expenses. A lot of times what we use for our operation is necessary. You can price shop and you can, have that discussion with yourself. Is it really a need or a want? But more oftentimes than not, you can usually trim off your household budget more than anything else. Okay. Awesome. Great job, Linda. That's fantastic. We want you to have a life. Like we don't want, we want, that's important. But I think sometimes when we're developing our budget, we can get into what Dave Ramsey considered as gazelle intensity. And hey, we're cutting out all the extras for this period of in time or for the season in our life to really get to where we need to be so that we can have some additional luxuries. I love that garbage pickup is my splurge. small things in life, right?
Yes. All right, Stephanie, what other, I guess, big tips or take homes do you have for us as we start to wrap up?
I think finding a system that works for you. My brain works differently than my husband's. Like, I can make a budget and he's like, I don't even understand what is happening here, but it works in my brain. So just really continuing how to have those discussions as a family or with your spouse, and just knowing that it can be fluid, like it's going to change. So making sure that you give yourself some grace, but putting a system into place that you're going to be able to utilize, and it's going to make it easier for you. Because if it works for your neighbor, it doesn't work for you, like, you're not going to use it. So finding something that really you can implement that makes sense to you, and is going to, simplify your process going forward.
I like the tips you gave on, the envelopes, or even, there's some really good cell phone apps that you can use where you can set up your categories and enter in the amounts as you spend them. I've tried doing that. I usually am just not nearly disciplined enough. I get like half of it in there. So for me, at the end of every month or every few months, downloading all my transactions and going in through and categorizing them. But if you're somebody who would rather, do it as you go, I think there's some really good apps. Most of them are free, just to enter in and categorize your expenses, and it kind of helps you track things as you go. Like Stephanie said, the envelope system is a really good system too. But I think at the end of the day, what the main take home could be is that, we say in agriculture all the time, you can't manage what you don't measure. If you're not keeping production records of some sort, if you produce hay and sell custom hay and you don't know how much a round bale of hay is costing you, then how are you, pricing it per the ton? And that kind of comes down to our household budget too. We have to know how much it costs to run our household per month. And for everybody, that's so different. But really, as you're going into the new year, it's a perfect time to really crack down and try to have a good system that's going to help you really dial in, especially with all the volatility right now in our finances. It's just amazing. Things have literally doubled in many aspects of what we spend on personal things. And so just taking some time to track it and to manage it, I think will really make a difference. And if you need any help with that, myself, through the university, we have several certified financial counselors and different things like that can work for you. I know Stephanie is always happy to answer questions for anyone. But I think at the end of the day, it's probably one of those things like exercise or anything else in our lives that we really just have to make ourselves do.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is like a perfect time. We're getting ready to go into the first of the year. But if you do nothing more, if you're not ready to do a budget, I would challenge you to track everything that you spend this month. Obviously, December looks different because of Christmas, but it'll help you to get a really good idea of where is all of your money going. And then that way, when you're ready to develop your budget for January, you're going to have an idea of how much gas do we use? How much does groceries cost? How much are my utilities? All of those kind of things.
Very good.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any other questions? If you do, you can put them in the comments. And if you watch this as a recording afterwards, if you put the questions in the comments, I'll still be able to get to them, and we'll do our best to answer all those. And Stephanie will be able to help with some of that as well. I'm volunteering her, but she's been so gracious to help, and I really appreciate that. And we thank you for everybody who joined us this morning. And we've had some good discussion, and I hope everybody has a happy and Merry Christmas as we move forward into our new year.
All right. Thanks, Callan.
Thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks. Bye-bye.